and gentlemen, analysts and associates, welcome to your Managing Director Secretary's favorite podcast, the Big Swinging Decks Podcast by Litquidity and Mark Moran. This is not financial advice. You'd be a bottom bucket analyst to make investment decisions based on what is discussed on this show.
Welcome back to another edition of Big Swinging Decks. Lit, my favorite part of the episode is getting to ask you, how the fuck are you this morning?
I am doing well, Mark, as always. It's been busy as fuck, but I think pretty soon people see why, and the memes will be hitting again, so...
It's been, it has been busy, but hey, that's what we're paid to do. We are paid to shitpost on the internet, as well as a few other things. But, with us today's a very special episode because we have someone who, we like to consider ourselves kind of the voice of Wall Street, at least for the juniors. And we have someone else who I think can be considered the same thing. We have Lydia Moynihan from the New York Post, who has broken many, many well-known, financially focused, Wall Street-focused articles. And so we're going to run through a phenomenal interview with her. Then we're going to play a little bit of a kind of a play on our cash or pass. We're going to call it Post or Hoax, where we run through New York Post headlines or other headlines, potentially even some that we made up, to see if Lydia can tell what's a New York Post headline and what's not. Lit, the one thing that we did recently, too, that we haven't talked about on the podcast until you prompted me right now was the shoe that we dropped, the partnership with Del Toro that is called The Fed, with 15% of profits going to a Ukrainian charity for what's going on over there. But super excited about that. The pre-orders have been great, and it's been very, very well received. So really excited we could drop that for the shareholders. But
and Mark, I want to see those shoes on my feet soon. So let's get these over.
They're there. You gotta get them from Andrew, the CEO, man.
Yeah, look, I have a couple of weddings coming up this summer, and I think those would be a fucking hit.
Hit at weddings, hit Casual Friday, on Nantucket, in the Hamptons, wherever. They're gonna play. I get a lot of compliments whenever I wear them. But speaking of announcements, what else is going on specifically with this podcast? You have an announcement, right?
Oh yeah, we do. Yeah, we are now going to be publishing our episodes on YouTube with some video. So I think if anyone wants to see me in my NFT form and Mark with his beautiful face.
You're like an animated NFT.
Yeah, it's a nice floating NFT. It's great. And the lip moves. I've got some sick sunglasses. It'll be great. So if anyone loves YouTube and wants to consume our podcast there, it'll be up every week. Same time, we drop the regular episodes. So follow us and subscribe on YouTube, and we'll keep you entertained there.
Amazing. So, like we said, we have Lydia Moynihan joining us. And so Lydia is someone who has worked in and around media for a while. She interned at CNBC while she was in college at the King's College, like the Ohio State. She also interned at NASDAQ, and then she was a production assistant at Fox, then a producer for Charlie Gasparino. And after she left Fox, she actually stayed in the same building because these two institutions are located in the same building. She then went over to the New York Post, where she does a little bit of everything there, but focuses on commentary on Wall Street. So we had a little bit of a few technical issues in getting this going because I chipped part of my table in trying to attach a microphone clamp to it, and that's not good. And then, Lit came on, and his avatar's mouth wasn't moving, so here we are. Without further ado, Lit, should we get into it with Lydia?
Let's do it.
Awesome. We have Lydia Moynihan, the infamous columnist from the New York Post, the friend of all of us, but the enemy of David Solomon. Lydia, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I just wrote another piece about how Goldman can be a hellhole. So it's just another day in the life.
Do you care to tell us, or should we wait?
I mean, it's actually live now. But any day we get to write about David Solomon is a good day. So
which seems like every day recently.
he's always doing things that are notable, not only in a professional capacity, but also in a personal capacity. But yeah, Goldman got a record number of internship applications, 236,000 this year. But people who currently work there are griping that it's a prison and they can't wait to get the F out of the place. And I think, isn't that life? Like, you always want what you can't have, and then once you're there, you're like, oh, this actually kind of sucks.
The grass is always greener, but it usually never is.
It sounds like nothing's changed since last year when the whole Goldman Sachs 13. Everyone was like, we're going to improve the work life and all that good stuff, and hey, it's more of the same. Which, it's like, is to be expected.
Well, that was the leaked PowerPoint heard around the world, and that was thanks to you guys.
Yeah,
that was thanks to Lit, and let's jump into that after, because we definitely want to spend some time asking about our friend David, DJ Soul, depending on who you ask. But first off, would love to tell our shareholders a little bit, and shareholders, that's what we call our listeners, a little bit about yourself, because you're someone who...
Do they get dividends?
We're trying to think about it. As a high growth company, we like to stay away from creating a dividend because it's sticky and then it'll have to be reoccurring in the future. And we want to use that to reinvest and to grow Litquidity as a company.
Yeah, we also don't want to treat it as a security and be under the SEC's watch
regulation.
Gary Gensler's no joke. Yeah, I don't want to get on his bad side.
We'll send him some free coffee mugs or something, though. Maybe
we'll send him a
T-shirt. An NFT.
Maybe an NFT. But so Lydia, would love to hear a little bit about your background, how you got to the Post, because I know you've been in the media business for a while, and I believe that you didn't even change locations when you switched to the Post in terms of where you're working previously. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. As long as I can stay in the same building. That was my number one qualification. No, I went to a very small Christian college in New York that people think they've heard of and they actually haven't. It's called the King's College, and it was less than 1,000 people, and it was a very rigorous education. And I think what that instilled in me very early on too was like, no one really helped you get internships or jobs there. You just had to sort of be dogged in applying yourself. So I got a few experiences. I got a gig at the UN. I got a gig at CNBC, and then I was like, oh, I like journalism. Like, you don't have to choose. You can do it all. Like, you can cover whatever you want. You can talk to whoever you want. You kind of get to do everything. So I really enjoyed it. And then I worked with Charlie Gasparino at Fox Business, and that was a riot. He's the best boss. He has a very sort of pugnacious demeanor, but he's
I heard he
such a
quoted as saying his job was to rip the lungs out of his competition when he was at Fox Business. Is that true?
Yeah, that sounds like something he would say. So it's funny though, because I will say this, working with him, it was great being a team, because he has a very confrontational personality, which can be very good for journalism. I do not. So that's something I've had to develop, or just cower and hang up when I've definitely gotten yelled at a fair share. So I think that's something I've had to hone, as you realize you would always say, you have sources and you have targets. So you have to be comfortable writing about the targets, and then you try to, avoid doing anything too like damning when it comes to your sources.
Right? Like, it was like that meme I made of you the other day. Well, it was Matt Damon, the one where he's sitting looking exhausted, smoking outside a door. And the caption was Goldman Sachs whenever Lydia Moynihan is calling for a quote.
Oh, it's Ben Affleck.
Okay, yeah. What? Oh, yeah, same thing,
Male celebrity.
Ben Affleck.
Overrated.
Yeah. But, yeah, you have targets and you have sources. And so, how long have you been at the Post for?
It'll be a year at the end of the month.
So in about the last year, how would you say you've enjoyed that time as a journalist and really kind of focusing in on certain places, and others I feel like don't have targets on their back, like maybe say a Goldman Sachs?
Goldman Sachs really does bear the brunt of it, but it's kind of their own fault.
They do it to themselves.
They do it to themselves. And you'd think if you're somebody, I'm not going to name names other than David Solomon because I want to protect my sources. But you'd think that there would be, if somebody really cares about being targeted in the press, which he seems to be, my understanding is he reads every piece of coverage about himself. He's extremely sensitive to anything that's said about him. To an extent, it's understandable if that is a reflection of what's happening in the company. But he makes no effort to meet with journalists. Like there are CEOs, there are people who run hedge funds. There's all sorts of important people who will reach out to you, make an effort to take you to lunch or coffee and establish a relationship and build a rapport. And he's never done that. So that's why I go back to what Charlie said. I have sources and I have targets. And you have to cover everyone fairly. You know, if a Jamie Dimon did something terribly, or any number of people did something terribly, you would have to cover that fairly. But at the same time, people who build relationships with journalists, you're more willing to hear that person's perspective.
I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize these days, especially with social media being so prevalent, is that you have to sort of craft your image or the perception within people. And, it's like, if you're getting dragged through the mud, right, like you'd want to sort of, at least for me, right, like I would want to respond to that and say, hey, look, this is why it's wrong, or at least, establish a rapport with journalists or the media to sort of say, this is my take of the story versus letting them, go ham with whatever they're seeing and getting from others. So that's kind of the reason why I like to respond to some people when, they say, oh, Litquidity's like, whatever, or does this or that. I'm like, look, I'm going to respond just because I don't want like something that's profoundly wrong to gain steam and like people start to say, oh, like, it must be true since a lot of people are saying it. But yeah,
it's interesting, and it's always a challenge, especially with Wall Street types, to get them to talk. But for instance, with the Deutsche Bank story that we were covering, where
you guys actually about that a little bit.
You guys were the first ones to flag that it was a strip club. But, you're making calls to people, and I think people kind of freak out when they hear the New York Post is calling. And my pitch is always, we're going to be writing about this, so it's better to have a say shaping the coverage than not. And the tough thing with covering a Goldman Sachs or bank like that is if you're an analyst and they find out that you spoke to a reporter, you're probably going to get fired.
You're done.
Yep.
You're done.
And if you're 22 or 23, that could like ruin your life.
Exactly.
So it's only the people at the top who are willing to take my phone calls and have a say in shaping the coverage. They're also kind of free to talk. But that, just by nature of the fact, like people who are disgruntled and angry are going to respond, our coverage is going to be skewed to be a bit more negative. And I always tell comms people that. And, I'm happy to talk with happier, cheery first-year analysts, but they never seem to volunteer anyone.
Yeah. And I mean, that's firm policy. Like they drill that into everyone's heads. Like, do not talk to reporters. You say, or you ignore them or forward, to the PR team or whatever. And I think that's actually what has led to the proliferation of a lot of anonymous meme accounts, focused on finance, all these analysts and people, because they do want to say stuff, but they can't because of these restrictive policies and being able to talk to the press and whatnot.
Yeah. And I think any other industry besides Wall Street is easier to cover. People in politics love to gossip. And I think news is, honestly, I get to gossip for a living. Ideally about high-level things like mergers or congressional bids or whatever, but it's gossip. And so people in D.C. love to gossip. People in Hollywood love to gossip. But I think people on Wall Street, for the most part, have done everything right in their life. Up until that point, they went to the right school, they got the right job. So they're not going to go against the grain and go rogue and bare their soul to a New York Post reporter.
And they chose money over, power or fame, right, for the most part. And so, by doing anything like you're saying to change that, then it does away with everything, which is kind of funny. And, it's interesting, though, because I think for you're similar to us, where you're someone where you're very much like the commentary, the voice, the overheard of Wall Street these days. And so, we've chatted in the past about various stories and have kind of covered a lot of similar things in different veins. But I'd be curious, before moving into other things, like what is your view of your role at the Post specifically, but especially as it relates to, say, a CNBC, Fox Business, Bloomberg, your more traditional financial outlets? Because I think for us, we probably see it in the same way that we are kind of telling a story that they're never going to tell, or that they will tell in a way that, is a bit whitewashed and not exactly the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to hear your take as well. But I said in my interview when I was speaking with the editor of the Post that people have to read the Wall Street Journal. They want to read the New York Post. And one of my sources always makes the comments, no one reads the New York Post except everyone you know personally. So it's fun now, having been there a while. It's like the last flight I took, we're landing and everyone in my row had the New York Post app open as we're landing. I'm like, oh my God, this is so great. I work there. And so I think especially in this day and age where we have so much sad, terrible, horrible news, people want a degree of levity. And you realize like what happens at Goldman Sachs, that's not a war. That's not famine. That's not at the end of the day something that's so perilous.
They are doing God's work, as they like
I am
to
so
say.
sorry. You're right. You're so right. You know what? This is a realization. This is a watershed moment for me. I've been wrong. No. And so I think people want a degree of levity. Like if you can poke fun at people who take themselves too seriously, why are you not going to do that? And I do think that people love to read stories and they love characters. And the Post is really good about making stories relevant to even like my mom, who doesn't know I love my mom. She doesn't know a lot about finance and banking, and she can read stories at the Post and have a sense of what's going on Wall Street.
Yeah, I think that encapsulates a lot of the kind of like interest in things like The Wolf of Wall Street or the movie Wall Street or Margin Call. Like just understanding finance culture, I think, is something that people really want, and just they're like, ooh, like what's this mysterious industry that people are tight-lipped about and controls a lot of money and all these other things. And I think that's also something that I've seen, and I think Mark has seen too, in that there are people that follow us that haven't worked in finance, or they're in a completely unrelated industry, but they still like the memes that they probably don't understand, just because I think they find it interesting for some reason. So I think there's an element of that, and good to hear that's the way you think about it too.
I was going to say, I think it's interesting too, because at one point there was in the Lazard training that Lit kind of shared a screenshot of one time. There was this slide and it was like, don't talk to reporters, don't talk to liquidity. And I think it's something because the way I view a lot of our role here is that, we are bullies, but we are bullies for good. And sometimes you have to bully a bully. And in finance, the juniors can't do that, right? So there has to be someone like, you, like us, to be able to facilitate that and to be that voice. And I kind of view both of us, it's kind of all three of us and two of our institutions as something that does that, right?
Yeah. No, I think there's this concept of the fourth estate, and people realize it's necessary in politics and all these spaces, and it's just as necessary in business. And I think, someone like David Solomon would never have to think twice about a meal stipend unless it's literally forced in his face and is the front page of the business section. But I'm curious too, because when Litquidity started, it was all about satire and poking fun at the space. And I'm just curious how you sort of transitioned to what you're doing now, which is really being a voice for analysts and associates and trying to bring visibility to people's compensation and some of these issues that have a big impact on a lot of people's lives. I'd love to hear you speak to that, Mark and Lit.
Yeah, I'll start, since I was the one that founded the brand. I guess it was just an Instagram page that, like, when I was an employee of a private equity fund, I was like at a small team and wanted to find a way to just like communicate with people that expressed similar interest in comedy, and also could relate to the shit show of going through investment banking. So from there, it was just reliving like the worst moments or the funniest moments that I had when I was an analyst in investment banking. But then over time, people would start sharing things, gossip, and it kind of took a different turn once the pandemic hit. That was like when I really shifted from, okay, this is pure comedy, to let's keep people informed, because that was when banks were freaking out about one person getting COVID, then sending them to work from home and tell the whole group, and everyone's like freaking out, because at the time everyone's like, if you get COVID, you're basically going to be in a ventilator, and like it was very fearful time. So I was keeping people, up to speed in real time. Hey, Barclays had a case, Citi had a case, whatever. And then over time was like, hey, I think there's a pretty cool thing that can be done with the platform to inform, but also entertain. So, have the same audience that people are going after, but, I think there's authenticity in saying, Litquidity is one of us, and we can trust him, through that. And so, Mark has been the first piece of the puzzle to sort of help, expand the brand and to really expand beyond just social media into a lot of other things.
And I think too, Lit, when I think of it, the idea of any of the memes that you've created, there's something that they take an example of something that is kind of the, apotheosis, the perfect representation of some ridiculous scenario, right? Mm-hmm. And it's something that, like, it's funny to the people in the industry, and it's coming across as a meme, and it's very niche. But then when Lydia takes something like that, then it's something that then, okay, this is such a ridiculous thing, like the Deutsche Bank strip club thing. Mm-hmm. Then it's relatable to a broader audience, because this whole, like, Wall Street culture is such, like, a tantalizing thing that, like, no one really gets outside of the world, but everyone wants to. And it's something that I think a majority of people, like, I know myself, when I was first, like, applying to jobs, I had no idea really what the place was like. You think it's like Wolf of Wall Street type stuff, and you get there and it's just like a bunch of, like, balding nerds with calculators, right? It's just very different. And I think that's, like, what makes, especially in the New York Post, like, this stuff's just so fascinating to the general public.
Yeah. But I also, just kind of to my earlier point where we were talking about, it's so difficult to get junior people to talk to the press in Wall Street. And I think it's kind of cool that we partnered, because you do have such a good pulse of what's happening in a way that no one prior to Litquidity has been able to do. And so you've sort of cracked the code where people feel safe talking to you guys. And that's really remarkable to do for an entire industry.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny because every time there's a bit of information, people are like, keep anon. That's the
like
catchphrase
of finance.
Yeah, it's
off the record, on background. The news biz.
Yeah, I'm obviously going to keep you anon. There's no need to say that. I have no reason to just post someone's face and picture and
I think being anonymous helps.
Yeah, it's like, look, I'll vet it myself and, like, ask people that I know, but I'm not after people's, like, okay, I'm going to attribute this to you. I'm just trying to get this information out. So I think people understand that I'm not trying to do that. So that's, I think something that,
people on Wall Street are uniquely nervous about stuff, because I cover some politics, I cover some media, I cover a range of topics. And people you talk to in politics, it's like they'll say maybe once at the beginning of the conversation, oh, by the way, this is, on background. Yeah. That's it. And they know how the press works enough that they'll just, and, it's also about having relationships with people. So I'd like to think they trust me. But whenever you talk to somebody on Wall Street, it's like 5-6 times, like, don't use my name, don't use my name. And I'm super happy for them to say as many times as they want to feel comfortable, because it does feel scary. But also, what you guys do and what I do for a living, a large part of that is keeping things confidential. So hopefully we're good at it by now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that people still just, they're stressing it because there are some journalists out there that don't really regard, that sense of confidentiality as, like, important to people. And they're like, well, I need my journalistic integrity. And so my editor is not going to allow this unless it's this. And so they actually end up doing it because they already found it and there's some technicality. And I think that just leads to more distrust. But I think, hearing you say that you value that, it's definitely something that people really want to know, and, like, would get them more comfortable in talking to the press.
And I think that's a great setup for something. But one thing that I do think is a great point to that is, it's like, when we have something, we're going to Lydia, right? It's like, for example, the New York Times, they'll never quote Lit in anything. They'll only quote me because of their newsroom standards, right? And it's like, the information is going to be the same coming from whoever because we have the information, right? So by doing that, though, they're excluding, the kind of like boots on the ground source for junior bankers. And in doing so, they'll never be the leader in terms of like what Wall Street culture is compared to you guys, right? Which I think is a fascinating concept.
Well, thank you. I hope that we have a broad appeal. And I'd like to think that, we have a little more flexibility to have fun and to poke fun at some of these industries and species. Yeah, exactly. Because it's so ridiculous. But I think, I'm also somebody who lies awake at night and feels bad about things. So I would never intentionally do anything to blow up somebody's identity. And even, with the Deutsche Bank story, it's tough. Like, it doesn't give me any joy in writing about somebody who's fired. I think that's a really sad thing. But it's just something that we need to cover. And I think I take that as a sacred trust to try and be fair. And we purposely omitted the two junior folks' names. It's like that doesn't have any value. Yeah, to me that has no value. I don't want them to have to Google their names and see a youthful indiscretion in the New York Post.
Yeah,
that's not worth it. Sometimes you have to cover it. We mentioned it for the two senior folks, but it just wasn't worth it. So it's like, if you can be a nice person and be a good journalist, you might as well do both.
We love it. We love it. And that was actually something we said a few weeks ago in our podcast that, hey, release the names of the senior people, but not the associate. So one question, though, is journalism, I never studied journalism, Lit never studied journalism, but it's something, or worked in it till now, it's something that's just, it's constantly changing and evolving. And I think we're at a very interesting time where, you're getting news from a meme page, right? Or what people perceive as a meme page. And so would love to hear your thoughts on kind of what general media's views on something like a Litquidity, a meme page is. Where do you see this going? How do you see it? Obviously you're someone who uses it in your work and you kind of are obviously embracing this and it's working out well for everyone, but would love your take on it.
Yeah, I think there's a mixture of journalists, some people who take themselves extremely seriously and would never, cite anyone who hadn't gone to Harvard. And so you have those very traditional sort of folks who do journalism in one way. And I think for established people, if you have your column at the Washington Post, if you have your column at the New York Times, you can afford to do that. But I think, especially in this day and age, you want people to see news. You want it to be accessible. And I think my editor has been super supportive. When I first approached them about this idea, they were really supportive. I didn't know how they were going to respond. But I think there's a recognition that, 10 years ago, you would never see a crowdsourced video on television. And then, when I was at Fox, all the time, almost every video of a natural disaster or a shooting or whatever is something that somebody took on Twitter. And so I think it's just a change in sort of the center of power. And you realize, for the first time, because of social media, whether it's video from a hurricane or getting information about Wall Street bonuses, if you can crowdsource that and have something that's more accurate and more relevant, why would you not use that? So I think it's great. I think slowly people are all going to have to embrace it, but I think it takes time. And I think for somebody of an older generation, this probably feels a little uncomfortable to them. And, obviously when we've worked on stories with you guys, it's been a good dynamic because we still have our journalistic process. We have to call, everyone we mention for a comment. We have to verify things. We have to make sure we get another source. So we're still doing all of our work, but it makes sense to, highlight and visibility to something that you guys are doing. And I think what's cool too is, talking with, some of these CEOs and executives, they all read the New York Post, and most of them still get it delivered to their house, which is fantastic. And so I think it's a really great way for sort of, a lot of people looking at your account to really reach an older generation and a generation of people who are making decisions. And hopefully it's also symbiotic for now your readers are paying more attention to the New York Post as well. So I think it's, you've seen in TV, again, people always have to use YouTube videos and Facebook videos and Twitter videos of what's happening. And I think that's just the future because you can't ignore good information. And it doesn't matter if it came from Instagram or a peer-reviewed study. If you can verify it and it's a good story, you should go with it.
For sure. Yeah. I've had, we've had conversations with some that refuse to side us, and it's like, okay, fine, go around the other way and don't get the right comments. But that's, yeah, I mean,
and everyone has a different
yeah.
audience, and
Yeah.
I totally respect that, and I think that's why it's a huge space, it's an ecosystem, and there's room for everyone. It's also interesting to, I kind of feel like the news model has diverged where you have more of a Daily Mail sort of approach where it's all about just getting as many clicks, and then you have like a Puck or something that's a little more niche, and that's about getting people to get out their credit cards and pay.
Right.
And so I think it varies to a lot of the businesses that have chosen the subscription model. They want to only, reach a certain group of people, and they're okay with that. At the New York Post, we want to reach everyone. So I think that changes kind of how we view our coverage and how accessible we want to make it.
Yeah, makes sense. Just to change the question a little bit, this one's one that we actually got from our shareholders, and curious if you've ever had anyone that knew an article's coming. Maybe it's like a bad piece of news that they're trying to squash, or they just want you to say something like positive about them. So have you ever been bribed by anyone? Like, hey, slip you 100.
But we know you haven't taken a bribe, but an offer of a bribe.
Yeah.
I've definitely, early on when I was actually at Fox, this happened where people would like offer to send me on trips and take me here and there and buy me things if I covered it. And the first time I got an email to like have a fully paid vacation to like a Caribbean island, I was like, oh my God, this is so great. And I asked my boss if I could do it. And he was like, no, you realize you cannot do that. I was like, oh, are you serious? Like, that's such a bummer. So yeah, I think people are willing to do whatever it takes to try and get their name in front. I mean, there's a whole industry of like people who literally email journalists every day, just asking them to quote a financier or an analyst or someone like that. So it's a weird dynamic too, where you have people who are extremely wealthy and powerful that you're covering, and I don't make nearly as much as David Solomon. I'm up there, but
close, but
exactly. So it's a weird power dynamic, and I think a lot, like, it's interesting. I feel like I see this more in tech coverage, where there's almost a resentment of like tech founders and certain people that they cover. And I think there is that in part is because of the wage discrepancy, that you're covering people who are really wealthy. And I think a lot of people feel a sense of resentment about that.
I have a funny story about that, because I do tread the line between, FinTwit, so everything finance and Wall Street news and banter on Twitter, but then also tech Twitter, which is, VCs and tech people, and then just tech media. And there is this like very, very bad relationship. Everyone's like always anti media because so-and-so like did a hit piece on this startup making a founder look bad, and then media is always
they're so
trying
upset Elizabeth Holmes was discovered. Everyone wanted that to keep going.
Yeah, it's such a toxic relationship there, and I think it's worse, I think, than or at least more publicly, like a spat between the people themselves than on Wall Street. But
yeah.
I got paid once for a meme that I put together, just summarizing the spat of the time. It was just ridiculous thing, a tussle back and forth, and everyone's retweeting and ratioing and all that shit. So it's toxic. So I think it should be in a better place, and maybe they can squash the beef eventually. But that's I just went on a tangent there. I think it doesn't sound like that's how it is with you, like people coming after you on Twitter, like with a lot of mudslinging. Is that a fair thing to say?
I mean, Twitter, it's a cesspool. There's always people making bizarre comments that you're like who? I'm so curious. I would love to meet one of the trolls
You'll never meet them in person though, because they can't put their face out there, right? And you know that that's why I get a lot of shit on Twitter, as you probably see. But it's like, if I were to ever see that one of these individuals in person, which I probably walk past them, they'll never say anything to my face. They'll never say anything to your face, but it's like that's the power that people feel on there, and it out of any platform, it brings out the worst in people, and it's
why is it people on TikTok are so nice? It's bizarre. There's such a discrepancy.
Well, they're Gen Z. You can't be mean to Gen Z.
Okay, but that doesn't mean a lot of times you can't be mean to somebody, but that doesn't mean they're mean.
But I feel like they're overly sensitive, is what I'm saying. Fair. So like they're just nicer in general. I don't know. Anyway, sorry.
Psychologically, though, I just would love if somebody was willing to even just get on the phone with me who was a troll, just to interview them and be like, what does this do for you? Yeah. Wouldn't that be I just don't know how.
Yeah.
Maybe I just need to start. Normally, when I send random LinkedIn messages or it doesn't really yield what I'm.
You should get on one of their Twitter Spaces. They like to.
I love that.
Yeah, they like to.
But they're nice on the Twitter. When I go on the Twitter Spaces, then they're all nice. Like I win them over when I'm talking. It's just they can't do it.
I'm like, are you drunk when you're posting this? Yeah. I don't. It's just so odd to me that that's how people think. I prefer a world in which there are boundaries and we don't know what people are thinking. And so this is kind of alarming to think of how many really
I think then
terrible people there are out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there would be a lot more people in therapy and then not going online to take out their weird thoughts sometimes. Because sometimes you're just like, that's not even funny. It's just like, yo, are you all right? Is everything going all right?
That is not a natural reaction to that post. Once somebody said that it looks like my chin had been hit with a shovel, and I think about that sometimes.
Damn, yeah.
I mean, I got called a fruity Ken doll yesterday, so it's like
I get called.
I feel like that could be a compliment. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm a perpetually online virgin, so
terminally online.
Terminally online virgin.
They're such specific insults.
Yeah.
I know.
It's one thing if they're like, you're a jerk and you're dumb or whatever, but they're very specific insults.
Well, actually, okay. So speaking of that kind of brings a question to me. So finance is a very male-dominated industry, right? And you're obviously doing commentary on the workplace, on what goes on. But I'm curious, from your perspective as a female, would love to hear that on general finance. But what is it like being a woman reporter? Talking, about a male-dominated industry, and how do you see your role and able to being kind of to affect change in there?
That's a very open-ended question. So yes. I'm deciding which way I want to go with this. I think Wall Street has made a lot of progress. I think in any workplace environment, it's more male-oriented. People say this about the temperature. It's set to basically what a man would wear if a man's wearing a suit. He would be comfortable at temperature. So I think there's still just a lot of that's inherent, and I think without getting too far afield here, I think it's as a woman and talking to other women who are in the space. A lot of times there is a sense in which you feel that you need to be more masculine, and it's interesting even looking at the Elizabeth Holmes. Any of her speeches, whatever, she felt like she had to sort of be more masculine and lower her voice and do these things to fit in. And so that's something I'm definitely conscientious of. I don't want to have to change who I am to cover this or to fit into a certain space. And I think that's frustrating. I think it's still a very male-dominated world. But I think hopefully there's a lot of progress. And even, the fact that 20 years ago or 30 years ago, it probably would have been just another day in the office for Deutsche Bank to expense a strip club. And so I think the fact that Deutsche Bank saw that and they're like, no, this is totally unacceptable. When probably for a lot of these guys when they were starting out, that was just what was done. I think that is a huge indication of progress.
Awesome. And so, we like to break our show up into kind of sections like it was a pitch deck. And so I'll say, we're going to flip to the next page. And so we normally play this game called Cash or Pass, where I just come up or I text my friends really crazy business ideas to then ask Lit to see whether he'd invest in them or not. But for you, the Post, they have some crazy headlines, right? That's always like one of my favorite things about it. So I want to play a game.
Wait. So before you finish that, I feel like the Post should have like at New York Post headlines like as a meme page in itself.
Well, have you seen the New York Times pitch bot where like sometimes you see a New York Times headline and you're like, yo, is this the joke pitch bot? Like, did a robot write this or what? Because
I mean, because I have
a great idea.
I have Lit Newsnet, which is actually filled with a lot of New York Post headlines just because they're so good.
I only get my news from the New York Post. I just get the notification, and that's what keeps me in the know. That's it. I don't read anything longer than a paragraph.
They have mastered, the perfect headlines to get you to click something.
Exactly.
There's some very clever wordplay.
Is there?
Yeah, I mean, it is a science.
Is there one person who writes the headline? Like, do you write the headline?
So it depends.
Okay.
It totally depends. And I'm kind of embarrassed to say I don't know this, but the paper is its own, and this is why I always try and post a picture of the physical paper because that's a different team, and they will sometimes come up with these wildly clever things. I'm like, and people move fast there. There's a whole paper they need to put out. And I would. That is some homework for me. I need to figure out
who is behind
that.
It's an art. Like those, you see a good headline, like it's just like chef's kiss, and so
that's one thing the paper can do. Yeah, the online, online, there's always like an effort to think about search engine optimization and all these things, which are very important. But the paper is just like free to be me. I can do whatever I want.
Right? Exactly.
I'm just laughing so much going through this feed. Sorry. Okay.
So what we did is collaborated and pulled together a bunch of. We have 8, if my math is right. If I'm looking at the computer, I don't know. I'm not that good at math anymore. But we have 8 headlines. Okay, and so we're gonna play Post or Hoax. Okay, so whether it's a New York Post headline or it's not, and then in that case it would be a hoax. If I made it up, if Lit made it up, or if it came from somewhere else. Post or Hoax? Let's go. Let's just start off. So, Lit, I'll take the first one. Then you want to take the second one, or you want to do vice versa?
No, I'll do the second one.
Okay. Okay. So this first one. So it is titled "Tiger Pulls Out," and then it's just a picture of Tiger pulling out some golf clubs, and in an attempt to save his marriage. Post or Hoax?
Post.
Boom. Right. All right. We'll insert a cool sound too. This next one, Lit. Take it away.
So this next one is colleagues finger billionaire Rajaratnam Galleon hedge fund. Real or Post or Hoax?
Colleagues finger billionaire.
Post. Oh, okay.
What was it?
This is a Wall Street Journal headline that I'm actually trying to pull up right now. But should we move to the next one?
Then the next was fingering. All right, Wall Street Journal. You definitely know like some boomer wrote that and they had no idea what they were.
No idea.
Yeah, and then it comes out.
Okay, boomer.
Yeah, and someone's like, oh no, that was bad. You don't want to finger the billionaire unless they're paying you for it. So okay, then the next one is it's a picture of the men's soccer team, the U.S. men's soccer team, and they've just been eliminated from the World Cup, and the title is just "This sport is stupid anyway." Post or Hoax?
Hoax.
Post. That was a New York Post one.
Oh man, okay.
Yep.
I know the strategy statistically is just to keep guessing the one thing, but I want to see if I can get it right. So I'm not being statistically smart here.
And then the next two we're gonna do are Anthony Weiner focused because that is like a New York Post specialty. So Lit, want to do the first one?
Sure. So Weiner pops out, no longer doing hard time, seen during house arrest.
Post.
Correct.
Okay, the next one, jerk off to joint. Can't say that without laughing.
Any graphics?
Well, a picture of Anthony Weiner.
Post.
Columbia Business School. No, I made that. I forget where I pulled it from.
Harvard Business Review.
Oh man. Okay.
One of my favorites is Elliot. It was about when Elliot Spitzer was caught having an affair. Elliot's best laid plans.
They just write themselves. I mean, the Wiener ones too. It's like your name's Anthony Wiener and you're doing that. Come on.
Some things are just perfect for the Post.
And the best part too is so for the Wiener Pops Out one, there was a picture of him like sticking his head out from the halfway house that he was living in. Like hilarious.
Oh my god.
All right. So next one. Yeah. So next one is I kicked the terrorist so hard in the balls that I tore my tendon.
Hoax?
Correct.
That's not even a headline. What is that from?
It was from the Daily Record.
I've never
I don't know
heard
that.
of
I feel like that's like a British tabloid, maybe. I don't know.
The Daily Record? I don't know.
Yeah, right?
I don't know.
So for the next one, it is titled "Headless Body in a Topless Bar," and then the subheadline is "Gunman Forces Woman to Decapitate Tavern Owner." Hoax.
That is like the iconic.
Okay.
Post.
All right. That was too easy.
Too easy. Yeah.
Okay. And then Lit, you want to do the last one? This is on another great politician from the state of New York that we live in, Cuomo.
Oh, I've heard of him.
I've heard,
Yeah.
Should he come back? You know, he's doing a lot of ads these days. He made a mistake. Okay, we won't get into politics.
Yeah. So
$18 million war chest and nothing but free time. He is plotting away.
Yeah. Okay. So this one is at the end of his grope, Cuomo.
Post.
Great one.
Yeah. Damn. All right. That was good.
Lydia Moynihan, we have one last question for you before we let you go. Are you in any way related to Brian, the CEO of Bank of America?
Mystery makes history.
Fair enough. If in chance you are, can you please ask his legal department to really just kind of stop trying to enforce our patent infringement on our Bofa These Nuts shirts with their logo? Like, they were great sellers for us.
Oh, yeah. That was in very high demand, and especially from Bank of America analysts.
Exactly.
It's all about the merch.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Well, hey, Lydia, thank you so much for the time today. This has been great. Loved hearing about your background and what you're up to these days in the role of journalism on Wall Street. So we look forward to being in touch and talking with you soon.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.